We stand in front of the Great Sphinx of Giza, a stone creature with a lion's body and the face of a god. For hundreds of years, we've been told it was carved by Pharaoh Khafre. It's supposed to be a monument from the 4th dynasty, built about 4,500 years ago to protect the pyramids of Giza. The story is simple, complete and easy to believe. School books tell us about ramps, copper tools, and workers moving limestone blocks under the pharaoh's orders. It's a story about human cleverness and a civilization at its strongest point. But what if that story isn't true? What if the Sphinx is much older than the pharaohs, older than Egypt itself? What if it's a leftover from a forgotten time when the world was different? A time when rain fell on a green Sahara desert and a civilization we've never heard of left its mark in stone. Welcome, seekers of the unknown, to Mystery History for Sleep. I'm Mr. H, your guide through the shadows of the past, where truths lie buried beneath sand and silence. Close your eyes and imagine the Giza Plateau, not as the dry desert we know today, but as a green, living land. Thousands of years ago, before the pyramids were built, before the Nile River became the lifeblood of Egypt, this was a place of grasslands, lakes, and heavy rains. The Sahara wasn't a wasteland, but a place full of life where human settlements grew strong. Rock art showed herds of antelope and rivers that have long since disappeared. This was the African humid period, a time between 7,000 and 4,000 BCE, when the weather in North Africa supported a world we can barely imagine. And it was during this time, some people say, that the Sphinx was carved not by the Egyptians, but by people whose names have been erased by time itself. In the early 1990s, a geologist named Robert Schoch stood before the Sphinx and saw something that changed everything. He wasn't an Egyptologist trained to repeat the accepted timeline of pharaoh construction. He was a scientist of stone, a man who read Earth's history in its marks. What he saw on the walls around the Sphinx wasn't the sharp horizontal wear caused by wind and sand, the kind that has worn down the nearby pyramids for thousands of years. Instead, he found deep vertical channels, wavy patterns, and smoothed corners that told a different story. These were the marks of water, not quick desert storms, but long, heavy rainfall, the kind that flows down rock faces for hundreds of years, carving channels and shaping stone in ways that only a wet climate can. To Schoch, the evidence was clear. The Sphinx had experienced a flood that ended thousands of years before the first pharaoh ever ruled. This discovery breaks the foundation of Egyptology. If the Sphinx shows signs of water erosion from a time when Egypt was green, it could mean the monument is older than the civilization we say built it. The last time the Giza Plateau saw rainfall like that was over 7,000 years ago, long before the Old Kingdom, before Egypt was united under Menes, before the hieroglyphs that tell us who ruled and what they built. If Schoch is right, the Sphinx could be 10,000 years old or more, a silent witness to a chapter of human history we've never written. But this raises a question that echoes through the ages. Who carved this guardian of stone, and why did their story vanish? The traditional story says the Sphinx was built by Khafre, the pharaoh who built the second pyramid at Giza. His name is connected to the monument through a broken statue found nearby, and the idea that the Sphinx's face looks like his. Yet there's no inscription, no royal seal, no clear text linking Khafre to the Sphinx. The evidence is circumstantial, a story built on closeness rather than proof. And when you look closer, the cracks in that story get bigger. The temples beside the Sphinx, built from limestone blocks cut from its surrounding area, show none of the same water erosion. Their surfaces are sharp, angular, untouched by the rains that shape the Sphinx's walls. This suggests the temples were built later, using stone cut from the Sphinx's own body, as if the monument was already there when the pharaohs arrived to claim it. Let's think about that. The Sphinx, a huge figure carved directly from the bedrock, required an amazing engineering effort. Over 1,000 tons of limestone were removed to shape it, a project that needed careful planning, tools, and workers. The builders worked with the natural layers of the stone, following them with a skill that rivals modern construction. Yet unlike every other monument in Egypt, the Sphinx has no name, no dedication, no claim of ownership. Pharaohs were not known for being humble. Their temples, statues, and tombs were bold statements, declarations of divine power carved in stone to ensure they would be remembered forever. To find a monument of this size, aligned perfectly with the sunrise at the equinox, without a single hieroglyph praising its creator. It's not just puzzling, it's unthinkable. Now consider what this means. If the Sphinx is older than the pharaohs, it challenges everything we know about the development of human civilization. The accepted timeline says monumental architecture began at the start of the Old Kingdom, around 3100 BCE, but a Sphinx carved 7,000 years ago would belong to a time we call prehistoric, a period when humans were supposedly living in simple settlements, not reshaping landscapes with advanced engineering. This isn't just about dating one monument, it's about rewriting the story of who we were and what we were capable of. Could there have been a civilization lost to history that had knowledge we're only beginning to rediscover, a civilization that understood geology, astronomy, and engineering in ways that challenge our assumptions about the past? This idea isn't as crazy as it sounds. Around the world, other ancient sites whisper of a forgotten chapter. Take Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a complex of stone pillars built 12,000 years ago, before the invention of writing, before farming as we know it. Its builders moved stones weighing up to 20 tons, carved detailed designs, and aligned their structures with events in the sky. Or consider the underwater ruins of Yonaguni off Japan, with their precise angles and terraces dated to a time when sea levels were lower, perhaps 10,000 years ago. These sites, like the Sphinx, don't fit the neat progression of history we've been taught. They suggest a world where advanced knowledge existed long before we thought it possible, only to be lost in some great disaster, a flood, a climate change, a collapse that buried their achievements beneath sand and sea. And then there's the legend of Atlantis, told by the Greek philosopher Plato over 2,300 years ago. He described a sophisticated civilization that thrived 9,000 years before his time, a society of architects and sailors that vanished in a single day and night of disaster. Could the Sphinx be a leftover from such a culture, a guardian left behind to mark a sacred place? The idea has been dismissed as myth, but myths often carry pieces of truth. The African humid period ended suddenly around 4000 BCE. As the Sahara changed from a green paradise to a desert wasteland, human populations moved to the Nile, where Egypt would later rise. What if the Sphinx was carved before that change? They're a monument to a world that was already fading, its builders knowing their time was running out. This brings us to a darker question. Why don't we know their names? Why is the Sphinx silent, its origins covered in a fog of forgetting? The ancient Egyptians kept detailed records, mapping their kings, their gods, their victories in hieroglyphs that have survived thousands of years. Yet the Sphinx, the most mysterious monument in their land, has no story, no creator, no purpose written on it. This silence feels deliberate, as if someone or something wanted its truth to remain hidden. The patterns of erosion tell one story, but the absence of words tells another. It's as if the builders chose anonymity over immortality, creating a monument that would last not through fame, but through mystery. And here's where the whispers grow louder. Some say the Sphinx guards a secret far greater than its age. The psychic Edgar Cayce in the early 20th century spoke of a hall of records buried beneath the Sphinx, a chamber containing the knowledge of a lost civilization, texts, tools, perhaps even technology that could rewrite our understanding of the past. Ground-penetrating radar in the 1980s and 2000s detected strange things beneath the monument, voids, and cavities that suggest artificial structures. Yet when researchers tried to explore further, they were met with locked gates and official denials. The Egyptian authorities have consistently dismissed these findings as natural cracks or unimportant. But why the secrecy? Why the refusal to investigate what lies beneath the paws of the Sphinx? This is where the sand begins to shift. The story of the Sphinx isn't just about stone and rain. It's about what we're allowed to know and what has been buried, not by time but by design. The water erosion, the lack of inscriptions, the strange things beneath the plateau, they all point to a truth that threatens the very foundation of history as we know it. The Sphinx doesn't just stand as a monument. It stands as a question, one that has waited thousands of years to be asked. Who built it? Why did they hide its purpose? And what are we not supposed to find? If this mystery already has you questioning everything you've been told, hit subscribe. We're only at the beginning, and the shadows of Giza have far more to reveal. As we drift deeper into the night, let the image of the Sphinx stay in your mind, a creature of stone, half lion, half god, gazing at the horizon where the sun rises each morning. It has watched empires rise and fall, seen the rains turn to dust and kept its silence through it all. But silence is not emptiness. It's a presence, a weight, a challenge to those who dare to listen. The Sphinx is not just a monument, it's a warning that history is not what we think, that the past holds secrets we've been taught to ignore, and that the truth may be far older, far stranger than we're ready to accept. So let's keep asking, let's keep digging, because the story of the Sphinx is only the first step into a maze where memory itself has been buried, waiting for us to find it again. In our last journey, we stood before the Great Sphinx, its water-carved walls hinting at a time before the pharaohs, time when rain fell on a green Sahara, and an unknown civilization carved a guardian to outlast their world. Tonight, we turn our eyes to the Great Pyramid itself as the towering heart of the Giza Plateau, a monument that speaks not in hieroglyphs, but in numbers so precise, so universal, that they challenge everything we believe about the past. What if the Great Pyramid isn't a tomb, not a temple, but a machine? A machine not of gears or circuits, but of geometry and time, built to preserve knowledge through the collapse of civilizations. Close your eyes, let the desert wind fade, and listen as the stones reveal their secrets. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands over 140 meters tall. Its 2.3 million limestone blocks are proof of a vision we can barely understand. Each block, weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons, was cut, moved, and placed with a precision that challenges the tools we say ancient Egypt had: copper chisels, wooden sleds, and human sweat. The base is leveled to within 2.1 centimeters across its massive 230-meter span, aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. Modern engineers with lasers and GPS struggled to match such feats. Yet we're told this was the work of a 4th dynasty pharaoh, Khufu, around 2580 BCE, a king whose name appears only once in the entire structure, scrawled in red paint on a hidden beam. But the pyramid's true language isn't in its silence or its single mark. It's in its measurements, its ratios, its alignments, a code written in stone that speaks of knowledge far beyond what we believe the Egyptians had. Let's begin with the numbers. The Great Pyramid's base measures about 230.4 meters on each side, forming a nearly perfect square. Its original height before the capstone was lost was 146.6 meters. Divide the perimeter, 921.6 meters, by the height, and you get 6.2857, a number so close to 2 pi that the difference is less than 0.1%. This isn't a rough guess, the kind you might stumble upon by trial and error. This is deliberate, precise, a mathematical constant encoded in the very shape of the pyramid. Pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, wasn't formally defined until centuries later. Yet here it is, carved in limestone on a scale that dwarfs human ambition. But the code goes deeper. The pyramid's slope, about 5184 degrees, contains another universal constant, the golden ratio, phi, approximately 1.6 and 18. When you compare the half-base length to the height, the proportions align with phi, a number honored across cultures for its beauty and mathematical harmony. These aren't coincidences. The chance of a single structure encoding both pi and phi by accident is incredibly small. But the Great Pyramid doesn't stop there. Its dimensions seem to know the Earth itself. Multiply the height, 146.6 meters, by 43,200, and you get 6,356,400 meters, an eerily close match to Earth's polar radius, within 99.7% accuracy. Multiply the base perimeter, 921.6 meters, by the same factor, and you get 39,931,200 meters, a figure that matches Earth's equatorial circumference with similar precision. Why 43,200? It's not random. It's tied to the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that completes a cycle every 25,920 years. Divide that cycle by 600 and you get 43,200, a key scaling factor that connects the pyramid's measurements to the planet's dimensions. This suggests knowledge of astronomy and geometry. That should have been impossible for a civilization without telescopes, calculus, or an understanding that the Earth is round. The pyramid's internal structure deepens the mystery. The so-called King's Chamber, a granite box at the heart of the monument, is built with blocks brought from quarries hundreds of miles away, fitted with a precision that modern masons admire. The chamber's sound properties are extraordinary. Sounds echo in ways that suggest intentional design, as if the space was meant to amplify specific frequencies. The air shafts, narrow channels extending from the chamber to the pyramid's exterior, are aligned with amazing precision. The southern shaft points to Orion's belt. The northern shaft points to the pole star, not as they appear today, but as they were positioned around 2450 BCE. This isn't simple stargazing. Achieving such alignments requires instruments that can measure tiny fractions of degrees, an understanding of how stars move, and the ability to calculate three-dimensional relationships between Earth and the heavens. No evidence of such tools or knowledge exists in the Egyptian record. Yet the pyramid stands as proof that someone somewhere had it. Who could have known these things? The Egyptians of the 4th dynasty were masters of practical math, geometry for land surveys, arithmetic for trade. But nothing in their surviving texts suggests they understood pi, phi, or planetary dimensions. Their astronomy was advanced, tied to the Nile's floods and religious rituals, but not to the level of calculating precession or stellar alignments across thousands of years. The Great Pyramid feels like a spike in knowledge that appeared fully formed and was never copied. Later pyramids like those of Khafra and Menkaure lack the same mathematical precision. Their slopes are less refined, their alignments approximate, their construction often compromised. The bent pyramid of Sneferu, built just decades earlier, had to be adjusted during construction to avoid collapse. If the Great Pyramid was the result of centuries of expertise, why did that expertise vanish so quickly? Why do later monuments show a decline rather than improvement? This leads us to a bolder idea. What if the Great Pyramid wasn't built by the Egyptians but inherited by them? What if it was a leftover from a lost civilization, one that encoded its understanding of the universe in stone to survive a disaster they knew was coming? The idea of a time machine isn't science fiction here. It's a metaphor for a structure designed to preserve knowledge through the collapse of empires, the loss of languages, the forgetting of entire worlds. Mathematical constants like pi and phi are universal, unchanging regardless of culture or time. Unlike hieroglyphs, which need a Rosetta Stone to understand, or papyrus, which crumbles to dust, geometry lasts. By putting these ratios in the pyramid's dimensions, its builders created a message that could be understood by any civilization advanced enough to measure it. This idea of preserving knowledge isn't unique to Giza. Around the ancient world, we find echoes of similar intent. Stonehenge in England, built around 2500 BCE, aligns with the solstices, encoding astronomical cycles in its stones. The massive stones of Baalbek in Lebanon, some weighing over 800 tons, suggest engineering capabilities that challenge explanation. The underwater structures of Yonaguni, possibly 10,000 years old, hint at a culture that vanished beneath rising seas. These sites, like the Great Pyramid, seem designed to outlast their creators, to speak across thousands of years not through words, but through scale and precision. The Great Pyramid, with its mathematical codes, could be a time capsule, a storage place of truths meant for a future that had forgotten how to calculate them. But why hide such knowledge in plain sight? Why build a monument so massive, so lasting, yet leave no name, no inscription, no claim to glory? Egyptian pharaohs were not shy about their achievements. Their tombs, temples, and statues are covered with names, hymns, and scenes of divine favor. The Great Pyramid, by contrast, is silent. Its only marking, a faint mark of Khufu's name found in an unreachable chamber above the king's chamber, feels like an afterthought, a whisper rather than a shout. Some even question if it's real, noting that the explorer Howard Weiss, who discovered it in 1837, was under pressure to link the pyramid to a pharaoh. But even if genuine, a single name doesn't explain the absence of everything else. No prayers, no maps of the afterlife, no rituals carved into the stone. This silence suggests a purpose beyond Egyptian religion, beyond the needs of a single king. Here is where the shadows deepen. Some researchers say the Great Pyramid was never a tomb at all. No mummy, no grave goods, no coffin lid, just an empty granite box in the king's chamber, too plain to be a pharaoh's coffin. The chamber's design, with its precise proportions and sound properties, hints at a function we don't understand. Could it be a chamber for preserving frequencies? For aligning with cosmic forces? For anchoring something we can't see but is essential? The air shafts, too narrow for human passage, point to stars with a precision that suggests more than symbolic intent. Perhaps the pyramid was a tool, a device built to interact with the universe in ways we're only beginning to explore. Through sound, through alignment, through the mathematics that govern reality itself. And then there's the whisper of something stranger. In the 1960s, Swiss author Erich von Däniken suggested that ancient monuments like the Great Pyramid could be the work of extraterrestrial visitors, beings who shared advanced knowledge with early humans. The idea sounds wild, but consider the strange things. A structure aligned to true north with near-perfect accuracy, dimensions that encode Earth's measurements, and a level of engineering that strains the limits of copper tools and human labor. Could the pyramid be a beacon, a marker left by a civilization not of this world, or one that worked with knowledge we've lost? The absence of inscriptions might support this. Why write in a language when your message is meant for those who speak the universal language of mathematics? This brings us to a chilling possibility. What if the Great Pyramid was built to survive a disaster, not just a flood or a drought, but a collapse of civilization itself? The precession cycle encoded in its scaling factor suggests a timescale that stretches beyond human memory. The pyramid's strength, surviving earthquakes, invasions, and for 500 years of time, suggests a design meant for geological ages, not just dynasties. Its silence, its lack of cultural markers, makes it universal. A message not for the Egyptians, not for their gods, but for whoever comes next. A civilization recovering from ruin, rediscovering the stars, would find in the pyramid's ratios a lesson of sorts, a teaching in Phi and Earth's place in the cosmos. As we stay with this thought, the pyramid becomes more than stone. It becomes a question, a challenge, a warning. It asks us not what we know, but what we're willing to admit we don't. The mathematical codes are there, undeniable, carved in measurements that have outlasted empires. They speak of people who knew Earth's shape, the sky's rhythm, the constants that bind the universe. Were they the Egyptians, borrowing knowledge from a forgotten source? Were they a lost civilization erased by time or design? Or were they something else entirely, leaving a legacy we're not yet ready to claim? If these questions stir your curiosity, hit subscribe, because the pyramid's secrets are far from exhausted, and the night is still young. The Great Pyramid stands not as a tomb for a king, but as a time machine for knowledge, a structure that holds truths too vast to be spoken, too lasting to be forgotten. Its ratios are a language that needs no translation. Its alignments are a map that needs no key. As you drift toward sleep, imagine standing in the king's chamber, surrounded by granite that hums with secrets. The silence is thick, the air heavy, the stones waiting. They don't tell you who built them. They don't tell you why. They only ask that you measure, that you question, that you listen to the numbers that have been true since the stars began to burn, and in that silence, you might hear the echo of a world we've forgotten, a world that built a machine to ensure we'd remember it again.